Today on Inspired Money.
The white people of North Carolina weren't ready to accept that. Mm-hmm. And that was clear to me from that time on. And, it just kept going. And I had a very deep, real sense that I did not care who opposed it. I was on the right side of history and the right side of that issue.
So you had a very strong sense of fairness.
Yeah, I think I did.
What's fair and what's right.
Yeah, it comes out of being poor. We really did have a struggle when my father died.
This is episode 12 with best-selling author and retired bishop Jack Spong. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. The show notes for this week's episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/012. Inspired Money is brought to you by my company, Runnymede Capital Management. We help clients to plan, invest, and worry less. Whether you're building wealth or planning for retirement, we're here to help. Learn more about us and educate yourself for free by subscribing to our blog at inspiredmoney.fm. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Can you do me a quick favor? If you listened to last week's show with rapper D1, the show was about 30 minutes long. I've received feedback from several listeners who say that for a money podcast, they prefer a show of this length, maybe even shorter at 20 minutes. Please go to inspiredmoney.fm/survey to let me know what you think. In your opinion, what is the ideal length of an Inspired Money episode? Thanks in advance, and thanks for your help to make this the best show possible. This week's guest is John Shelby Spong. I've always called him Bishop Spong. His friends call him Jack. His books have sold more than 1 million copies. He was bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Newark, New Jersey for nearly a quarter century before retiring in 2001. His admirers acclaim him as a teaching bishop who makes contemporary theology accessible. A visiting lecturer at Harvard and at universities and churches worldwide, Bishop Spong used to deliver more than 200 public lectures each year to standing room-only crowds. His best-selling books include Rescuing the Bible from Fundamentalism, A New Christianity for a New World, Why Christianity Must Change or Die, and Here I Stand. Bishop Spong has appeared on 60 Minutes, Good Morning America, Fox News Live, Politically Incorrect, Larry King Live, and The O'Reilly Factor. In this episode, you'll learn first, how growing up poor in North Carolina shaped his views and compelled him to fight for what he believes. Second, what the Bible teaches us about money. And third, how the Diocese of Newark grew its endowed funds from $4 million to $40 million during Jack's term as bishop. Now let's get inspired with best-selling author and speaker, Bishop Jack Spong. Bishop Spong, it's so great to have you on the Inspired Money Show. Thank you for joining me. The question that I like to start with is, what is your earliest childhood memory of money?
Well, I didn't have much of it. We were very poor. And it was the Depression. This was 1931. I was born in 1931. And nobody had, at least nobody that I knew, had much money in those days. And so it was a gift, and it seemed precious, I suppose, because money meant you could do things and we couldn't do things, and so it was a gift. And when it got better, it didn't get a lot better. And then my father died when I was 12. The Depression was pretty over. The World War had lifted us out of the Depression. It was 1943. And he he died, and he left my mother with nothing. She had 3 little children. I was the middle one, and she had a 9th grade high school education. She never went further than that. She murdered the King's English. But she had to go to work and find a job, and she wasn't qualified for anything. So she took the one thing she had skill in, and that was taking care of babies. And she got a job in the baby department at Belk's department store. Her first salary was $18.75 a week, and she got up to $21 before she left. But that was what we lived on. It was very, very slight, and we didn't live well. We moved from a very big house into a very small house because we couldn't pay the taxes anymore. And I can remember the bill collectors coming to our door and demanding payment for this, that, and the other. And the furnace was going to be turned off, and the phone was going to be stopped, and it was just a hard life. And I came to appreciate money a great deal, but it was in the absence of it that I felt that.
And you felt at the young age of 12, you had to take on some responsibility.
Yeah, I had to take on a lot. I started carrying the Charlotte Observer, Charlotte News first and Charlotte Observer next. I always had a job. I worked on a farm, an Ashcraft dairy farm, stripping the cows. People are surprised to know I can milk. But, I always had to contribute to the well-being of our family. I was the middle son, but the middle child, but the first son. And I don't know why I had that responsibility. I guess my mother told me I had that responsibility. I had a younger brother who's died since, but he never knew a thing about money. He never saved any money, and he carried the paper too, but he would spend what he collected before he paid his bill, and it was a downer. And Mother used to confide in me all of her fears, and that's a tough thing to do to a child. And so I began to take over. My mother finished just the 9th grade. She didn't have any sort of experience of anything bigger than that. But she kept our family together, and we worked hard. And I and my brother both went to college, and that's a very big achievement for her. She was a great woman in many ways. I don't know of anybody that ever did more with less, and she certainly shaped my life and shaped my attitude toward money.
It's very commendable. For our listener who may not be familiar with you, I think that you are 86 years young. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You spent 20 years as a priest in North Carolina and Virginia. You spent 24 years as a bishop in Newark, and then you're author of 24 or 25 books. And you suffered a stroke just a little over a year ago.
Yep.
And I have to commend you that your mind a year after a stroke is much sharper and quite accurate.
Well,
I feel embarrassed for myself.
I hope that's true, Andy, but I just say I hope that's true. I have trouble saying the words I want to say, and I have trouble writing, but I don't have trouble thinking.
I can imagine a little bit of frustration with that disconnect.
But you learn to live with that, because I've had a wonderful life. I wouldn't want to change a thing about it, not even the stroke. It just came to a quick end. I was pretty heavy. I was 85 at that point, and I still had a heavy schedule. And we gave it up in one event. The schedule was just off, and I now live without much to do. But I'm happy, and I can stand that.
Now, this show is called Inspired Money, and from making it to giving it away, we say that inspired money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe even making the world a better place. When I look at your life and your vocation, I think you can check off all those boxes. It's like all of the above. I'm curious, as a young man, Did you have a vision or goals to champion causes, or were those things that just sort of happened more organically?
They happened when they arose in the culture. Race dominated my life all the way through my years in Richmond, and it was pretty well solved when I got up here. The battle for women to have the right to be priests and bishops was a great battle next, and I was out on the frontier of that, and that's been settled. Nobody even objects to a woman today anymore. And the battle for gay and lesbian people took its place, and that's been settled. I don't know what the battle is that we will now engage.
It's got to be fulfilling that many of these battles, which were highly controversial at the time, in many ways have become much more widely accepted today.
Yeah, it is. It's just amazing. When the Supreme Court authorized gay marriage after all the struggle, I felt we celebrated. I felt like we were so happy. And our church was always a little bit ahead. We were always getting hit for it. I ordained the first gay man in the Episcopal Church. No, I didn't ordain the first gay man because they've had gay bishops and gay priests forever. I ordained the first openly acknowledged gay man, and he had a partner, and I knew he had a partner, and we made his partner a member of the church, and I supported gay marriage. At first we supported something as called the blessing of a gay union. That was what we talked about first, but we now we use the word marriage, and marriage is an agreement between a couple and the state. It's not an agreement between a couple and the church. So if somebody wants to object, it's okay for me. If they object, they just won't have the church on their side. Mm-hmm. But what you do is when you attack things when they arise in your life, and these things arose because they were going on everywhere. Well, I remember in Richmond, I had my first female acolyte. That seems very strange to think now that we thought that was a big deal, but it was a big deal. And I put her on the 8 o'clock service, so not many people would see her, and not many people object. And she fainted dead away in the first service. And they began to talk to me about how girls shouldn't be acolytes because they are so flighty and faint. I had appointed the first woman lay reader. And she was from London. She had a BBC accent. I've always liked BBC accents. My present
Most of
wife,
us do.
Yeah, my present wife is a good example of that. But I thought when this woman read the lesson that they would be thrilled to hear this accent. They weren't thrilled at all in Richmond. They were just angry. And when she administered the chalice, they all came up to my side and wouldn't go to her side, and we had this emptiness. That's not too long ago, but and women couldn't be wardens, but it came and we fought and we won. We didn't always win at the time we thought we would. We lost the battle for the ordination of women in 1973 and won it again in 1976. But it was a real divisive issue, and we still have churches that are sure that God always speaks through men.
Were you ever afraid of being a controversial figure?
Yeah, I was in Tarboro. I was public enemy number one of the Ku Klux Klan. That was official designation at a fire burning in the country. I was always proud of that. I wanted that on my tombstone. But it was tough.
How is it that you were able to run towards it rather than running away?
Well, I guess I appreciated it, and I didn't feel that I was being singled out for a negative reason, but for a positive reason. The Klan was active in Tarboro when I was there, and I had 3 little girls. They were 6, 4, and 3. And I was called in the middle of the night frequently by a Klansman who was threatening to rape my daughters the next day with the biggest, blackest, and then they used the N-word. And it was scary for them. It wasn't scary for me particularly. But we walked them to school. It was only 4 blocks away, but I walked there with them every morning, met them in the afternoon. And we did normal things like that. And the people in Tarboro, they didn't agree with me, but they liked me. And that made a difference. They weren't going to do to me what was done to so many other people. And I was an Episcopalian, which made it, you can't get rid of an Episcopal priest if the bishop doesn't want you to. That's just a fact. And my bishop was really firm on that. When I was a bishop, I defended really some incompetent priests, because I wasn't going to let anybody throw a priest out of his work, because that would intimidate every other priest in the diocese. So I suffered a lot of incompetent priests because that principle was important to me. It still is.
I hope it's evident to you that Jack Spong is very much a man of principles and stands strongly in what he believes. I'd like to share with you some stories that Jack shared about his early childhood.
One school in Charlotte was having a patriotic assembly. That was a popular thing in the early days after the World War began. And they invited my school to send 3 students and a teacher over there, and my school accepted. I didn't know anything about what was in the background of this, but I was picked to be one of the 3 students. And I went to that school, and my eyes must have bugged out of my head. It was a black school. I'd never seen so many black children in my life. I saw black teachers and black principal, and the only black people that I'd ever seen up until that time were workers in the fields, in the yard, and in the kitchen. And so it was just a very expansive experience. And I know well enough to keep the experiences inside until I know what I'm talking about. So I just sort of just took them in. We went into the assembly, and they set us upon the stage. We were a big deal in that school, and they were so glad to have us come over, and I see now why, but I didn't particularly understand it at the time. And they said, let's stand and say together the Lord's Prayer. Well, that was quite legal in 1943 in North Carolina, and nobody thought anything about it, and everybody stood up and said the Lord's Prayer. And I suddenly realized that we were all praying the same prayer to the same God. And we couldn't ever go to church together. It didn't make sense to me. And then they said, let's remain standing and sing our national anthem. Well, I was a Cub Scout, and I knew the national anthem. I was so proud to be able to do that. And I stood up, put my hand over my heart. But they didn't sing, "Oh, Say, Can You See?" They sang what was called the Black National Anthem, called Lift Every Voice and Sing. And I'd never heard this before, but every child in that school knew it. They knew it by heart. And I listened, and the words talked about the trek through slavery and the lash of the master and bleeding feet and everything. And slavery had been presented to me as a benign, nice thing that we Christians had done for the dark Africans. We taught them how to brush their teeth, and they weren't very smart, and so we sort of took care of them, and they were secondary citizens. But all that mythology got blown away by that thing. And I remember processing that for weeks and months afterwards, and I couldn't talk to my parents about it because they didn't understand that. Mm-hmm. And none of the traditional wisdom made sense, but it just burned in me for some reason or other. And I just filed it. I didn't know what else to do with it. I filed it, and someday I'm going to have to get this thing straight. Well, I was 10 at that point, and I spent a lot of time trying to get it straight, but it was a brand new experience. I remember when I was much earlier, 3, I think, maybe 4, and my father decided he'd build a brick yard in our yard on the side separating 2 houses. We had relatives that lived in the other house. It wasn't designed to keep the relatives away. It was just a decorative wall. Mm-hmm. And he hired 2 brick masons, a helper and a mason. And I was told I could help. 3-year-old boys are glad to help. And when the day came, the 2 brick masons were both African Americans. One was an old man with white hair, and the other was a young kid, maybe 17 years old, his helper. And they began to build this wall, and I was helping. And the old black gentleman said to me something, I do not know what, but something, and I responded by saying, "Yes, sir." My parents had taught me I always say sir to my elders. Well, my father was irate. He took me into the house very forcibly and sat me down and lectured me on the fact that you do not say sir to a black man. I didn't know what that meant. It was just so strange. I did what my father had said I ought to do, and I was punished for it. And I didn't know how to process that, so I filed that. And I kept filing these experiences, and none of them made sense until you put the key in and get rid of the slavery and getting rid of the effects of slavery. But I didn't understand that, so it took a long time. And money was all tied up with that, because you could hire a black maid for your kitchen at $3 or $4, $5 a week, and you could hire yard men at very, very similar small salaries. And it didn't occur to me that was part of economic stealing. You're stealing their labor is what you were doing.
So these childhood experiences really shaped you, especially if you look at
Yes, they did.
How important it is for you to defend ethnic minorities and women and gays.
Yeah, everyone. It's that's burned deep in me, and it didn't come easy, because you don't think about segregation when you're a child. You just sort of experience it.
Right.
I didn't understand that black children weren't in school for good reason. And when I finally did begin to understand that, we had a doctrine in the South called separate but equal. That was a joke. Separate but equal meant in one school district where I lived that the black school children used the same textbooks as the white school children used, but they used them as used textbooks whenever the whites got new ones. So they'd send the old ones down and they would get marked up and all sorts of things. When I was an 18-year-old, senior in high school, I was elected president of the young people of the Episcopal Church in the Diocese of North Carolina. And that was a huge honor. And I barely knew there was a diocese. My parish church was about as far as I'd gone. But I got into this larger world, and I felt very good about that. And I went to the diocesan convention, and I was introduced to a young man who was called the president of the young people of the Diocese of North Carolina. Well, it blew my mind. I remember that I'd been elected and hadn't been contested. Well, he was a black man named Perry Lieza. I still am in touch with him. And he was the president of the black young people of the diocese. I didn't even know there was any black young people. And so I wrote my bishop in the 12th grade and said, we're having a convention of the young people of the diocese, and I'd like to invite Perry Lieza and his organization to come and be part of it. That was 1948. The bishop wrote me a strange letter. He wrote back and said, the people of North Carolina aren't yet ready to see black and white children playing together at the diocesan camp. Well, I wondered who wasn't ready. I was ready. Wasn't ready in the unreadiness. And so I just took that and I said, I think the bishop's wrong. By that time, I'd become a moralistic person about that. He's just wrong. He doesn't understand the issues. And I think he was a great man. I don't mean to be critical of him. He's a great man. But he was bishop when desegregation was ordered, and he was known as a liberal. And he proposed that we integrate one grade a year beginning at the first grade until you got to the 12th grade, and it would all be integrated. Well, it's fine if you don't happen to be a black child in the second grade, but he couldn't embrace that. But he meant that the white people of North Carolina weren't ready to accept that, and that was clear to me from that time on. And it just kept going. It was, and I had a very deep, real sense that I didn't care who opposed it. I was on the right side of history and the right side of that issue.
So you had a very strong sense of fairness.
Yeah, I think I did.
What's fair and what's right.
Yeah, it comes out of being poor. We really did have a struggle when my father died.
Can you tell us about, is there a story about when you felt your calling to the priesthood?
Yeah, I guess I can tell that story. I was active in the church all my life. I was active in the Young People's Service League we called ourselves, at St. Peter's in Charlotte. And we went from there to being president of the young people of the diocese, which was quite a big jump for me. But it was the only place where I really felt affirmed. I was not a good student in school, not until the 12th grade. I had too much on my mind that couldn't be pushed away. In the 11th grade, I remember making 3 C's and 2 D's. And then I was elected president of the young people of the diocese, and I had a purpose. And the next year I made all A's and won a scholarship to the University of North Carolina and finished that in 3 years and had a 95 average. And it was just a real burst of energy that because I found meaning in my education that I hadn't found before. So a lot of things began to come together that I recognized I had a brain. And I began to want to use this brain. And it was the church primarily. It was the affirmation of my life. And so it was very easy to be in that world. Now, I think that's probably pretty neurotic today when I think about it. But I've thought about it a lot of times in my career, and I would say that no matter how neurotic it was, that you offer this neurosis to God, and God accepts it, and He uses it anyway. Mm-hmm. And I had a wonderful ministry in North Carolina and Virginia, and I still love the church, and I love every church I've served. I had more influence over Richmond as a priest than I had over New Jersey as a bishop, because it just was such a vital organ, but it prepared me well for this. And, I'm lucky. I just really feel lucky about all these things. When I began to write books, that started in Richmond, and it started because I started teaching a Bible class, and then I wondered what to do with that after I'd finished teaching. And so first thing you know, that became the background and study for writing a book. And I've written, I don't know how many books, 26, 25. And these books began to open other doors to me, worldwide doors. I've lectured now in over 500 colleges and theological seminaries around the world. My books are in every language of the world that I can think of. All the European languages. I just got Russia recently. And Oriental languages, even Arabic. I find this hard to believe. I can't imagine how I'll sound. I hope they're translated good, because I don't know. I can't speak any of them. And I hope they got somebody who's good to translate it. But you never know.
I love the sense of purpose, because it's not easy for people to... It's like you're born into a socioeconomic environment. And today you read a lot about, kids who are born in the projects. It's hard to get out.
It is.
There are many barriers keeping them from getting a proper education, or, how can they exit? So I love that this sense of purpose was really motivational for you. And, created a turnaround for you in your academics.
The church created that, and the church also gave me a father. In 1946, right after the war, the old retired rector from our church, who served it because of the war, he couldn't find anybody younger. He resigned, and they called a new rector, and he was 32 years old. I didn't know you could be a priest and just be 32. I thought you had to be about 80 to be a priest. And he arrived driving a Ford convertible. That was a strange thing for me to try to process that. I thought priests drove hearses. I didn't think they drove cars. And he had a beautiful wife, and she must have been a fairly wealthy woman, because she was bedecked in furs and jewels every Sunday, and she really looked good. And he became just a super father to me. I would do anything to be near him, and somehow or other he seemed to like me too, so it worked out very well. But I served as an acolyte at every 8 o'clock service because nobody else was willing to serve. I was eager to serve at 8 o'clock, and I was carrying the Charlotte Observer at that point. I get up at 4 o'clock and deliver my papers. I had about 150 of them, and come home and shower and dress and catch a bus and go downtown to go to church. And I was exhausted by the time I got there. It's been a long day already. And he made it so exciting for me that I wanted to be with him. He's died now, but
he was a mentor to you?
Yeah, everything. He took his father's substitute. I didn't know that then. I just look back and see him as his father's substitute. He was a great man. Mm-hmm. No, he's not a perfect man. No, neither am I. Neither's
none of us are.
But he wound up being an alcoholic and getting forced out of the priesthood. Mm. My father was an alcoholic, and my foster father was an alcoholic. So alcohol is a great big piece of my life, and I don't want to ever be hooked by it. But and I drink very sparingly. In fact, since I've been sick, they don't allow me to drink, and I can now make a virtue out of it. But it was an interesting experience
which sometimes could be tough for an Episcopalian because Episcopalians are known to enjoy their wine.
That's right, not just wine. Scotch was the beverage of choice.
Now, I've heard you speak many times, and frequently I go home saying, I am really glad that I am not debating Bishop Spong about the Bible because you are such a scholar and
it's a great book,
an expert. I'm curious, since we're sitting down together, what does the Bible teach us about money?
It teaches us that we are responsible to be stewards of it. Steward means that you recognize you don't own it, but that you have authority over it for a short period of time. Money is important to me, primarily because I had so little of it when I was a young kid. I really rather enjoy being able, at the end of my life, to give my children something to hang on to, although they don't need it because every one of them is a successful person. But it still gives me some pleasure. They can give it away if they want to do it, and I expect some of them will. I'm not sure that we deal with money very well in this country. Our tax procedures are heavily weighted to the well-to-do and to big business, and they fuss about it. They fuss about you got to cut spending in order to balance the budget. When you cut spending, what you're doing is cutting out the poor, and that's going to be a very minor solution. You got to get rid of a lot of poor people to do much about the deficit. But we've got salaries today well over $1 million, $10 million, $15 million, $25 million, depending on their bonuses. I don't know that people need that much money to live. I think they can probably live on $10 million. I don't think they can have to have that much. But that's where status is today.
Yeah, the inequality is just growing.
Well, it is, and people, it's in their best interest to realize this and do something about it. You have two choices, either in inequality. Marx was right. Inequality will grow until the rich control 99% of the money, and 99% of the people control the other 1%. And then you have a revolution, and people get killed. But I'm not a fan. I'm not opposed to people being wealthy. I think that capitalism is the best system of economics I've ever heard of. It's made more people well-to-do than anything else, but a capitalism that doesn't guard the system by protecting the weakest among them is what I want to protect. So I think we ought to, let people have wealth, let innovation be profitable, let hard work be profitable. Some people aren't going to work hard, and they shouldn't be as successful as those who are going to work hard. But I think that you've got to let people remember that you're not average. I'm not average. I was very average when I was a young boy, but I'm not average today. And I've got to remember that there are lots of people in a situation where I was that need to be given a leg up. And I don't know how you do it. I think that's basically a government function, not an individual function. But I think it's got to be. You got to always be plowing it back. There's always going to be somebody on whose backs the whole society rests. I just don't think it ought to be the same people in generation after generation after generation. We ought to have a way of arresting poverty and getting people off the list. And I'm sort of one that got off. I'm not wealthy, and I will never be wealthy, but I've got plenty to take care of my needs. And I know what it was like when my mother would pay $2 on every bill she had because it's all she could get away with.
Mm-hmm. Well, you are a best-selling author of many books.
Yeah, that has helped.
Well, I know that you are you enjoy investing in great companies too. I know that you enjoy researching companies and understanding what kind of companies you invest in.
Well, I enjoy the whole. Your father's one I've talked to many a time, and when I was a bishop, your father was one of my primary advisors on money, and I did what few bishops do. I got involved and we had
you
a
were
company.
Quite hands-on.
Yeah, it really was. We had a company called W.P. Stewart that managed our money, and I went to their annual meetings every year, and Sam went to some of them, and I was determined to do a good job of that. I had a man named Elliot Knight who took it over, and we had $4 million in endowed money when I became the bishop. We had $40 million when I quit, and I didn't do anything about that, but I put the right people in, and they did do something about that. The money of the Diocese of Newark was put in one fund. It was managed by the bank. It was managed by they didn't give you. Well, it put everything together. You couldn't choose whether you wanted to be in growth fund or income fund, and we just split that. And we got the bank to manage the income fund, and we got W.P. Stewart to manage the growth fund, and we were suddenly making more money than the diocese had ever had before. And it was just a matter of strategic planning. It wasn't anything else. And so I guess I had one thing that was a talent. I knew when I didn't know enough about it, there were some people around that did, and I was pretty good at picking talent. And we had the DIT at one point had the president of Goldman Sachs running it. That's hard to beat. And it had the former research head of a Bank of New York and a few other people like that.
No, it's a real success story.
It really is.
I'm lucky to have met some of those people and seen you and Christine at those annual meetings.
Well, everything I did, I loved. I loved working with them, and I love those guys because the DIT trustees, the Dawson Investment Trust trustees, became my best friends because I was asked them a million questions, and they always. We'd go to the W.P. Stewart would come to us 3 times a year, and we'd sit down and we'd ask questions. And I was so dumb. I asked the question that everybody thought they ought to ask, but nobody wanted to ask because it make people feel how dumb they were. Well, I just looked at the papers, and I want to know why this is done so poorly and why this is done so. And I heard answers that I'd never heard before. But they were good people.
It's great just to surround yourself with people who are passionate about what they do and competent in what they do.
Yeah, I'm a great believer in competence. I want somebody. I don't want to turn the money of the diocese over to somebody to put it in railroad bonds or something that.
What advice do you give to young people?
I expect I know too much than to give advice to anybody. Life is a mystery to me. We're all different. I would say to people, you gotta know who you are, you gotta know what your gifts are, and you've got to find a way to exercise them. But I can't tell you how you do that. It's a deeply personal thing. And some people will exercise them and never achieve much.
Now, you mentioned to me that you have a teaching assignment coming up, and then I also wanted to ask you, where can people find you, your website, and that information?
John S. Spong, and I don't do anything with it, but other people do. So there are lectures and everything else. Last year, I tried to decide whether or not I was finished, and I accepted 4 invitations for this spring with the hope that I'm not finished. I don't know. Well, I really want to retire because I don't think I'm up to what I used to be, but I want to find out if I've got it one more time before I do that. And I may do that at the end of any one of these 4 things.
Best of luck to you, and I will post the links in our show notes so that people can find those links. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, Andy.
Thank you for your friendship and the many experiences that our families have shared.
Well, you got a wonderful family.
Thank you, as you do too.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening. What were your favorite inspired money moments? I love that Bishop Spong felt early in his career that he had a real sense that he was going to be on the right side of history. And then the church gave him purpose and meaning to his education. And then perhaps the most important thing, the financial tip today, is to hire smart, competent people, and don't be afraid to ask questions about your investments. It seems that people are often afraid to ask the questions that seem dumb. But really, those are the questions that others are also reluctant to ask. So whatever your questions, fire away. I don't have a preview for next week's show ready, but have some great interviews coming, I promise. From athletes to authors to entrepreneurs, we've got some great stuff coming up the pike. You won't want to miss it, so go to iTunes right now and hit subscribe. If you can take 20 seconds more, please leave a review and rating. Send me an email with your iTunes username, and I will send you an autographed CD of Jim Kimo West and Ken Emerson's Slackers in Paradise. All the music on today's show is by Jim Kimo West. Aloha, Kimo. Want to be an inspired moneymaker? Do something that scares you. Do something that's going to make you better. Do something to give back in a bigger way to the world. Tweet me or email me what you're doing. Until next time, find your inspiration and run with it.